The building that we're going to be spending very little time in used to be the Ohio Supreme Court. But the court vacated it several years ago because it wasn't large enough for all of their tasks. So now our senators, our state senators, are there, okay? When we finish the tour, which will be back here for you folks that just arrived, make sure you spend some time in the museum shop. We don't care if you buy anything, but it really does have a lot of neat products relating to Ohio. And also, our museum is right straight down there, and that museum we won't have time to go into, but you can spend some time in there. The original Ohio Constitution is there on display, and there's lots of information about our government. It's very interesting if you've got some time to do that. Okay, let's start out. I walk quickly. Good morning. Good morning. We're just starting a tour.
Oh, where are the restrooms?
If you want to, down and to the left. Okay. Yeah, that's a higher need. We're here in what we call the crypt area. And what you start to see are the characteristics of the Greek revival architecture that our capital and many capitals in the East, and also our national capital in Washington, is Greek revival. So these are the vaunted Roman arches that are always a part of it. And of course, we are here in the base down. If you looked up through the ceiling, you'd be right in the center of our capital. The dome and everything is right here. Like a lot of capitals, we are symmetrical, same on one side as the other. This is kind of the House side, as we call it, and this is the Senate side that we call it. Here in our crypt area, we have two bells. Right there, if you tour Ohio capitals at all, or capitals at all, you've probably seen replicas of our Liberty Bell. This is our big deal, July 4th, 1776, when we celebrate our victory over those ugly British people that kept us in bondage for all those years, okay? So this is our Liberty Bell. And there's 50 of these, each state has one of these that was donated by a society several years ago. The original, of course, is in Philadelphia. On a more personal note, over here, Ohio became a state in 1803, all right? Just about 20, 25 years after our revolution. Back in 2003, we celebrated our 200th anniversary. And again, these people from Europe, 200 years does not mean as much, but it's a big deal to us. We had pictures on all the barns, and we had very much a big celebration that year. And one of the things they did is they got 89 of these bells made down in Cincinnati and sent one out to each of those 88 county seats. So if you go to one of those county seats around Ohio, you're going to see one of these bells. This one is neutered. They used to have a ringer in it, and of course all the fourth graders had to ring that bell, and after about the third one, you could hear nothing. So they took the dinger out now, so that now that's all I can do with my ring, but that's about it. Okay, let's go on upstairs. We'll speed things up a little and take you on an elevator ride. This was put in as part of the restoration 25 years ago to coincide, of course, with the American Disabilities Act. And it also is a nice thing for old tour guides to use to go up 2 floors. So we'll do that. Okay. Also, the children that we take, a lot of times, you know, they're writing notes back to us how much they enjoyed the tour. This was one of the high points of the tour. It's kind of disappointing. Don't pay no attention to that. That's the rear guard here. We want to go to the main side here. That leads to the rotunda. We'll be taking that later.
How long have you been a tour guide here?
20 years. 20 years. I retired from education. I still enjoyed teaching, so I decided to come down here and continue teaching. Okay? We are here in what's called a stairwell, a light court. When they made buildings back in the 1800s, they didn't have the luxury of artificial light, ductwork, air conditioning. So the only way to bring fresh air and light into the indoor structure was to provide for these light courts. Now picture it, of course, without the glass ceiling, without the elevators, and without the stairwells. These were just open courts. They could come in, open up the windows, get the fresh air and the light, throw their garbage down if they wanted to, because there were drains down in the bottom that would take all the precipitation, garbage, and so on down to the river. Now, during the restoration, they decided obviously to make use of this area. Years before that, they'd put the ceiling on as soon as light came along, artificial light. So they put in the elevators, they put in the stairwells, and as I say now, you can see up to the top. This is our cupola up there, of course, where we broke from the Greek Revival architecture is that we do not have the traditional dome on the outside. Our architects wanted to be innovative, so they put a cupola around that dome. And we will see the dome from downstairs, but it's only really on the inside, and that cupola is on the outside. Here we talk about the construction of our Capitol. And by the way, you see where the water used to run down before they put the ceiling on, the glass ceiling. This is Ohio limestone. Our entire Capitol is made out of stone. We're just like a pyramid. This is Ohio limestone. There were 3 quarries just west of here, about 12 miles. And they started out, they put a railroad track from here out to those quarries. Then in the morning, they load up their axes and sledges and wedges, stop at the Ohio State Penitentiary to pick up volunteers. A lot of prisoner volunteers were used traditionally during those days to do things like this. They'd cut this limestone out of big hunks, put it on the railroad car, come up here and cut them into these cubes with these steam-powered cross-cut saws. Then they'd put 2 iron rods up, 2 holes in the bottom, one on top of the other, just like Legos. I tell the kids, we're a big stone Lego. Now you do see steel here, but it was part of the restoration where they merely reinforced the light courts and made a firm foundation for the elevators. That's really the only steel that you'll actually see. As you walk by this limestone, you will see several 100,000 fossils, because this limestone was formed underneath the ground where the Ohio glaciers went over the top for years, hundreds of thousands of years. And so what you're seeing is all the plants and animals that were there. Take a look. This is one for your camera here. This is one of my favorites. Nice little, but we have students that come, archaeology students and so on, that come and just spend all day looking at fossils. Doesn't do a whole lot for me, but you know, if you're into fossils, we got a lot of them. Okay. Follow me? Here you start to see the colors and a lot of the original woodwork. And of course, the high use of imported marble. We have no marble in Ohio. It was all imported. You see the electric lighting, but of course it's made to look like the early gas lighting that would have been there back in the 1860s. The primary functioning, of course, of our Capitol at the present time is the home of our Ohio legislature. We call our legislature here in Ohio the General Assembly. And just like the majority, almost all of the other states, we have two chambers. We have the Senate, where we are now, and we have the House, where we're going to be in a few minutes. These are the only inhabitants of our state house that still exists. Originally, the governor was here, the Supreme Court was here, the state library was here, the Attorney General was here, and gradually, we know what happens to government. It grows. And that means that these other places ran out of room here and went to adjacent rooms or adjacent buildings that were made. In front of you are 33 seats representing, of course, our 33 state senatorial districts. Each of those represents a certain segment of our population. One of the problems here in Ohio right now that we're having difficulty in deciding the new districts based on the 2020 census. It's still in and out of the courts. So we're still using, I think, our 2010 as our vehicle for our elections. Republicans dominate both our Senate, where we are, and our House. There's a 2/3 majority Republican here, 2/3 Republican over in the House, and we have a Republican governor. Now, of course, this is a pivotal year because it's a general election year for all of the representatives. They only serve for 2 years, and about 1/3 of our senators, they have a 4-year term. Unique to several states, including Ohio, is we have something unique called term limits. Really? All right? That means that after a state senator or a state a House representative serves his 8-year term, they are out. They can't succeed themselves. And this, of course, was and is an attempt to keep a fresh group of people coming in. Now, you can go from here over to the House, from the House here, you can run for governor, but basically, you don't have the same inbred for 25, 30, 35, 40 years that you see in some chambers, and you saw in the Ohio chamber back before we had term limits. About 16 states out of our 50 have term limits, and the rest are all talking about it, but they haven't done it yet. The books that you see there are the Ohio Revised Code. By state law, you must have a hard copy of all the state laws. Now, I don't see anybody opening those books up anymore because now with laptop computers and glossary feeds, it's easy to put in what you're looking for and get it much quicker than opening up those books. You see the blue couches up there to your left? The one couch is there on the left. The matching one is over on the other side. This, of course, is where the Senate uses for VIPs. If you are a person that has brought a particular fame to your district and to Ohio, your state senator may ask the Senate president for permission to bring those people in or bring that person in. This might be a high school basketball team. This might be a famous singer. This might be a professional team. It just depends on what has happened and what type of honor that the Senate wishes to proclaim. You see, of course, on the Senate president's right, the American flag, and then on the left is the Ohio flag, which happens to be the only non-rectangle. It's a pennant. It's got a big V in it. So if you're ever on Jeopardy, and they ask you, what is the only state that does not have a rectangular flag, you can say, Ohio. And you suddenly win $10,000 and you have to send me half. Yeah. Okay? Okay, right. Now, voting here is by voice vote, very old-fashioned. When they're ready to vote, the Senate president will hit his gavel, and then he will ask the clerk to stand up between those two lower lights and recite each of the senators' names in alphabetical order, always. So they will say, Senator Axelrod, Senator Bacon, and so on throughout, all the way to Senator Zaleski. And as their name is pronounced, They, with their microphone, will indicate either aye, means that they're in favor of the legislation that's being considered, or nay, they object to it. And of course, if they're not here, they're counted as an abstention. So a two-thirds majority, a simple majority is usually the only thing that required in most of the cases, and that would be 17 if all 33 are here. And of course, if there's less, then it's a majority of those that are here and voting. You see the television cameras in front to your left, and you see them in back. All of our meetings are streamed live on the internet, so you can actually see them if you want to, if you don't want to come here into the gallery where we are now. Our Senate and House meet on Tuesdays and Wednesdays during what I call the school year. Right now, here in the middle of August, they haven't been around for several months. They've been back in their home districts, raising money, making a living. Many of them are lawyers and businessmen, and they have to pay attention to their business because they can't really live on the $65,000 a year that they receive here as their stipend. You can also see, this is very characteristics of your Greek revival. Take a look at these beautiful Corinthian columns. The lights, of course, are now electric lights. They were originally gas lights. And the problem of gas lights was they had to lower them before each meeting. They were on cable. Light each of the gas jets and take it back up. Now, provided beautiful light, but we know what happens to open flame. Black soot would soon encumber the ceiling, which meant that they would have to go up. And of course, back in the 1870s and 1880s, they didn't have all this nice modern equipment where you push a button and you can get up that high. So they had the old ladders and everything, they had to go up and scrub that down. So when electric lights came along, the first thing they did was to bring all of these lights down and junk them and put up beautiful fluorescent fixtures, okay? Now, that wasn't very beautiful, but it was functional. And then, of course, as part of the restoration, they were able to bring back the copies of these lights, and now, of course, they're electrolyzed. They're still on that cable. They can push a button, bring them down, dust the fixture, put in the new light bulbs, and so on. The three ivory chairs that you see to the left are for members of the press. If you work for a newspaper or a television station, you can show your credentials to the clerk, and they will allow you to come in here. We got 3 on this side, 3 on the other side. It's kind of a first come, first served. They can sit in there. They can interview the senators over breaks and so on. Any questions on anything that you've seen? Okay. The American Eagle, of course, there you see in most state legislatures someplace, and that's, of course, a symbol of the Republic of the United States. And if you had a close-up of that from the top, that eagle, bald eagle, has in his talons on the left, he has a peace offering, and on the right he has arrows. Okay, let's boogie. How you doing? Good place for a picture. If you want to cock your camera, I'll take a picture of you two there. And then you can get everything, the lights and everything come in there nice. Yeah. Okay. Now, when you come to Ohio, when somebody says OH, it means you have to say IO. Okay? All right? It's very, very simple. Okay, are you ready? Okay. OH? Okay, good. One more time. OH? Okay, that's good. That's good. Okay. Picture? Mary? Picture? Cock me a camera and I'll take it for you. Okay, thank you. Watch your step.
That was an imaginary step.
That's right. Have a nice trip.
Is there a reason for the two sets of doors in the Senate?
What's that?
There's two sets of doors. There's an inner door and an outer door. It was the exact same. We were in Lansing, state capital, and that was the exact same.
Really?
Double door. Is there a reason for that?
I have no idea why that would be.
And it's the same kind of thing. One's wooden,
Right.
and I take it that one's leather.
They're big.
Aye.
Yeah.
So one's made of wood, and the other one has a leather.
Right.
coating.
This is our rotunda. We're about 2/3 the size of the rotunda in Washington, D.C. We go up 128 feet. The one in Washington is 182 feet. Easy to remember. Up there on top is a seal of the state of Ohio, as it was back in 1861. And that is because you see a river, and on that river you see a river boat, a canal boat. And a canal boat was on there because that was what provided most of the trade in Ohio back then, both east and west and north and south were these canal boats because the trains had not run through here and we had no highways. In the center here, this is 6,600 piece of imported marble. As I said, we have no marble in Ohio. This all came from Italy, Vermont, and Colorado. In the middle here are 13 pieces of marble, roughly representing our original 13 states or 13 colonies. And then around the outside, we had 35 arrowheads, stars, whatever you want to call it, representing the 35 states that were part of the Union back in 1861. We, of course, added 15 states after that. Memorials here in the rotunda. Over here, certainly the statue of Lincoln reminds us that Lincoln was a 3-time visitor to our capital. Abraham Lincoln was a young senator from Illinois when he rode through on his donkey a year before our Capitol opened, and back on the back porch, we'll show you when we leave, this is where he gave a speech to the people the 350 people that came that day, asking the people to vote for him. This is the way that you ran an election, or you ran as a nomination back in 1859. The second time he was here, he was down in our governor's office. That's our old traditional governor's office. It's not used except for ceremonial purposes now because it's too small for the big staff the governor has. He was down there with Salmon Chase, and he got messaged by teletype that he had been elected president. In 1865, of course, the war ended in April of 1865, and as you know, Lincoln and his wife went to the theater to celebrate the victory, to celebrate the non-division of our nation, and he was shot twice by a Confederate sympathizer, John Wilkes Booth. He was taken to a rooming house next door, 2 bullets in his head, only survived a couple of hours, passed away. Big funeral in Washington, obviously. This was a president that had led us through the worst time in American history. Problem is, you didn't fly into Washington for the funeral. You didn't watch it on television in those days. So what they did is they took Lincoln's casket after the funeral in Washington, put it on a funeral train, and started back from Washington, D.C. to Springfield, Illinois. So they stopped in New York City, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, and finally Cleveland. And then on April 25th, 1865, those doors opened down there, and 4 Army officers brought Lincoln's casket in here and placed it in the middle of the rotunda. Facing south, they opened up the casket, with the flowers and the ferns and everything, opened up. 60,000 people went through that day, paying their homage to Abraham Lincoln. A very, very sad day for Columbus, Ohio. The flag that was flying over the Capitol that day has been preserved by the Ohio Historical Society, and it happens to be on loan from them. And as you see, there's 36 stars there, not 50, and that, of course, represents the 36 states that were part of the Union at that particular time. Every year on April 25th, we reenact that. We have the Army officers, we have the casket, we dig up Lincoln, put him in here. Another hero of the time, a fellow by the name of Oliver Hazard Perry. As you know, those British people just wouldn't go away. Even though we kicked them out in 1776 out of the colonies, they went up into Canada, took over Canada, and they controlled Lake Erie. And that means all of the early settlers in Ohio, Pennsylvania, New York, Michigan were being badgered by the British fleet that controlled Lake Erie. So finally, this young man by the name of Oliver Hazard Perry successfully was able to get 6 ships built, train the men, and sailed into the area up there in Lake Erie, Put in Bay it's called, and encountered the British. Didn't go well. As you see on the left in this painting, with the fire, his ship, the Lawrence, catches fire. Rather than go down with his ship, he gets on board the rowboat and goes 2 miles over to the battleship Niagara, and there he's able to turn the tide of the battle by getting on board and taking charge of the remaining 5 ships. This is one of the only battles in American history where there was an unconditional surrender. The ships, the men, the ammunition, everything. And Oliver Hazard Perry teletyped back to Washington, "We have met the enemy and they are ours." A very, very important time in American history. Okay, let's go this way. Go down and to the right. And be seated. Front row seats, $2 seats. Watch your step coming down there, yeah. This, of course, is our other chamber in our General Assembly. This is the Ohio House of Representatives. You saw 33 seats over in the Senate. We have 3 times that at 99, okay? To remind you once again, we have a 2/3 majority in the Republican side and only, of course, the 1/3 in the Democrat side. So looking at it, if you go to your left, 1, 2, 3, 4 sections roughly are inhabited by Republicans right now and 2 by Democrats. Similarities. VIP seat, the red couches, similar to the blue couches, are used for giving homage to people who have done something in that particular representative's district that needs and hopefully uses the theme of the VIP. I always chuckle when I say VIP. I had some 4th graders a couple months ago, and I asked them if they knew what a VIP was. The little girl raises her hand. She says, "Very important person." Very good. I said, "Well, can any of you think of somebody, some people, that might be honored here as VIPs?" And right away, another little girl raises her hand and says, Britney Spears. And all the kids go, yeah, Britney Spears. And then, of course, I had to say, well, unfortunately, Britney Spears is not from Ohio. She has not brought any particular type of fame to Ohio, so she would not be a VIP. I said, somebody like John Glenn. And then, of course, the kids give me this blank look like, who the hell is John Glenn, you know? So whatever, it's all generational. Similarities, you of course see the American flag on the Speaker of the House's right, and on the left you see the familiar Ohio pennant, but you also see that blue flag that's gilded in gold. That's a flag for, I'm trying blanking on it. Yeah, right, for people missing in action. Right, what do they call it?
Well, I think it's POW.
POW, that's it, POW flag, exactly. POW, POW flag. And one of the reasons for that is a reminder that our legislature, I don't know about yours in Washington, but the individuals are not exempt from military duty. And so that means if they were a member or are a member of a reserve unit or a National Guard unit, and they got called up to Afghanistan or Iraq, they were required to serve. The good news was that all of the 4 or 5 that were put into action came back unscathed from their 9-month duty. The bad news is that no one represented those areas during that time because there's nothing in our Ohio Constitution that represents a situation that would not merit that. On the left, down there, you see a lady looking at us. Her name is Joanne Davidson. Look, a woman. Now, why is she there? Well, since 1803, there has been one woman that arose to the position of Speaker of the House. Okay? That's a real interesting fact, isn't it? Anyway, and that was Joanne Davidson back in the early 2000s. And she was a Republican that served for a couple of years. She's still active in the Republican Party, but no longer, of course, in the legislature because of term limits. Other similarities here, of course, you see the laptop computers. And the big difference here is voting is electronic. Because of 99 members, it would be time-consuming to do a voice vote or a standing vote or raise your hand vote. So they have installed during the restoration a electronic system. When they're ready to vote, the Speaker of the House will hit his gavel. He'll check with his IT man who's up there, and a bell will ring, and that indicates that the particular bill that's being considered is now up for vote. Debate has been ended. It's now time to count. So, if they want to vote yes, they push in the green button. You see right above the laptop computer, there's a green button and a red button. If they want to vote yes, they push in the green button. If they want to vote no, they push in the red button. And they have about 60 seconds to debate back and forth, whatever they want to do. And then the bell rings again, and the votes are locked in. Looking to the left and right, you see what looks like 2 large blackboards. Those are electronic scoreboards. And those light up. They have all the names of the 99 members in 3 columns, from Ahrens to Zaleski, okay? If they voted yes, their name is lit up in green lights. If they voted no, their name is lit up in red lights. And if they were not here or abstained, they would be amber. Then on the bottom would be an automatic electronic devised tally. So many yeas, so many nays, and so many abstentions. And of course, if they're all here voting, they're looking for a majority of 99, which would be 50. And of course, if they have less than that, it's a majority of the ones that are here and voting. Must be here to vote, can't vote from their offices, can't vote from home, can't vote virtually, must be with their butts in the seat to vote. As you see on both the left and the right, far left and right, more media seats here. We only had 6 of them over there in the Senate. Here we have almost a dozen or so that are available both on the left and the right. Larger gallery here. This holds about 230. You get a good view of those lights here, and obviously a great view of this ceiling that has won many awards for its restoration. This room had a lot to do with the restoration because this is where the plaster was starting to fall on the representatives. And they got the message. And so when it came to a critical vote on whether to ask for the money to restore the Capitol, they remembered the plaster hitting the desk, hopefully.
Question?
Yes?
The colors of the stained glass, do those have any meaning?
Those colors are not valid. Originally, it was all one color. They didn't really have the ability to color the glass like that. And it's just aesthetic. It's just totally aesthetic. And obviously, on the other side of that, if you looked at this from the air, you'd see this bulletproof plate glass on top of those. You follow me? And so all they had originally was just, the single panes of glass because they wanted to be able to have their sessions without using those gas lights. So look at it. With 3 sides, this is a light cord over here on the left, okay? And then you open up all these shutters, and with the transparent glass, it was pretty light. When of course it was light in this, if you live in Ohio, we don't have a lot of beautiful sunny days in the winter, but that was the theory. Of course, keep in mind that most of the representatives and senators in those days were farmers. And that meant that from, April until September, they were making their living. And they would come here probably in late October and try to wrap it up in February so they could get back to their farms. So that meant that during that period of time, they tried to get along with as less lights as possible. Okay, let's move on. Nice acoustics. We have, around Christmas time, we have choirs that come in here in big circles and give concerts. It's really beautiful. This is our ceremonial governor's office. It is and was the original governor's office. This is what his actual office looks like. It's on the far side to the right, and this happens to be our present Republican governor, DeWine, that's here in this room, and this is the original desk where almost all the last dozen governors or so have signed on and have autographed the desk. Lots of antiques in here, which of course one of the reasons they closed it up. And this happens to be a partial picture of his staff. So over 120, they're not all there. And of course here is this flag if you haven't seen it, this is the American flag, which is rectangular, and this is what we're talking about as a pennant. Yeah, you see? These gentlemen, as you see, all gentlemen, are former governors of the state of Ohio. And their pictures have been put up here for the public. We actually did have a woman governor for 8 months during one of the times that of a succession. I forget exactly what, but so she was legally, obviously, a governor for a while, but her picture isn't up here. Should be up here. Should be up here. Let's go down this way. These are various rooms that are used for special purposes, briefing rooms. These are also for committee rooms, for hearings on bills, many of them named after one of the 8 Ohio former presidents. This is Ulysses Grant Room, and this is where you have your committee. Mostly on, of course, on this side, you have a house. We're coming out what was the back door of the house, the State House. And this, of course, was downtown Columbus with its dirt roads, stables, stores, housing, trees. And these were the steps where Abraham Lincoln was when he actually gave his speech asking the people of Ohio to vote for him. They put a plaque here to memorialize that. Stephen Douglas, who he was running against, was down on a little bit on that second street down there on that second pole, but they haven't put anything up there for him because he lost.
Yeah.
This is the atrium area that was created when they put these 2 buildings together. Before, this was just an outside place with 2 different buildings, and each of these buildings had a plethora of pigeons. You can imagine what plethora of pigeons do, and you know what pigeons do better than anything else. They used to actually call this area Pigeon Run, because when you went from one of the buildings to the other, you ran. The day before they put the ceiling on, they fumigated and killed most of the pigeons off and scraped them out. But one they took and stuffed him. That's Pete up there. You see him in the gable? And he overlooks the area and reminds me that this used to be called Pigeon Run. And over the holidays, they put a little Santa hat on him to commemorate the spirit of the times. Architecturally, this is really a neat place because you have Greek Revival architecture. You have neoclassical over there, when opened up in about 1900 with the Supreme Court. And then, of course, here you have kind of Art Deco in the middle. All limestone from the same quarries. But of course, this hasn't been outside since it's been finished, and that's why it looks so new, although it's been here for 25 years. This is called, of course, the atrium, and it was created primarily because of the lack of any larger room in the Capitol to have state-sanctioned activities. So if you wanted to have a conference or a rally, there was no place to have it. So now we have this atrium, and everything from wedding receptions to meetings, book clubs, and so on are used here. If you're an Ohio resident, you can use this facility for a nominal rental fee. And from a wedding standpoint, I think we had about 22 weddings in here last year. And of course, you get married up in the rotunda and then bring your wedding party down, and this is set up for your meetings. You've got your orchestra, you've got your caterer. And then, of course, over here, since this was the entry to the Ohio Supreme Court, when it was the Supreme Court, they made sure that when you entered here, you were impressed with the opulence of the court, with all this beautiful marble, imported marble, the murals up there, the use, of course, of gas lighting, and of course, this makes a great place for pictures. Get your wedding party up there on there, and bring them in here, and it makes for a great place. Neoclassical. Nice
Nice to
meeting
meet
you.
you.
Good. I'm just ending up this tour, and we'll be right with you.
Okay, thank
Okay.
you.
So we kind of made the circuit around. We're ending up here. As I indicated at the start of the tour, take time to look at our State Museum shop and also the museum down there. We appreciate your attention. We're glad for your visits, and have a nice day the rest of the way. Okay.
Hope to see you around.
Good. Thank you. Right.
Appreciate it.
Right.